Hello, I'm Rick Stivers of YoungMartin'sReels, and tonight we're going to be working on these 304s. I'll tell you a little bit of the history of what happened with these. I bought a lot of Mitchell 304s on eBay, and I really didn't pay much attention to it and didn't examine it real close. Well, when the lot came in, I found that two of the reels that I received were these Mitchell 304s. I was disappointed at the time, and I tossed them over to the side. I thought, well, what dinky little reels, who wants anything like that? Those won't hold up well at all. Well, that was several years ago, and now I've learned a lot more about them and found out that, yeah, these are much lighter weight reels, but they're supposed to be. They're ultralight reels, and they're actually very well made little reels for what they're used for. Obviously, it's not as sturdy a construction as the 300, but they still do a really good job. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and tear one of them down, and the other one I'm going to do a little bit of troubleshooting for you. See, is it? Yeah. On this one, we're going to troubleshoot it just a little bit. If you look, you will see, well, let me take the spool off. Or slide it up a little bit. See how the line is uneven? It's more towards the top and less at the bottom. Well, we're going to troubleshoot that and see if we can figure out what's wrong with it. I believe I know, and we'll take it from there. If you just need a basic on how to take this reel mostly apart and clean it and service it, I recommend going over to Second Chance Tackle with Dennis Kuntz. Dennis is a professional reel restoration man, and he does a tremendous job with them, and he does a really good job of showing you. Some of the things that he doesn't get into, though, is a complete tear down of the entire reel. So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to take this reel completely apart to show you how every single part goes together, so that in the event that you've got one that's a basket case or somebody hands it to you in a bag and says, here, can you put this together, you'll be able to take it and do so. This is far more than you would ever want to do normally for normal maintenance. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, we're going to take off the handle. Well, we never really take off the knob on a handle, but you might get one like this. And this handle on this reel actually does unscrew, comes off. You can take it apart, clean it, lubricate it, and put it back together. We're going to set it off to the side. Next thing we're going to do is unscrew the handle shaft itself, the handle arm, remove it, set it over to the side, and next we're going to remove the spool from the front. This drag nut comes off, next comes off the spool. If you look at the bottom of the spool, you've got your clicker on the bottom, and this gear right here on your axle shaft is what provides the clicking sound when you're in drag mode. Hear that? Okay, and we're going to clean up the spool. We're going to remove this axle shaft, but we're also going to take this bale apart. That's one of the things that Dennis often says, you don't go into this unless you have to. Well, we're going to do it tonight just because somewhere someone's going to need to go into it, so we're going to take it apart. But normally you leave this alone. You don't do anything more than lubricate it and put it together, or leave it together. All right, next we're going to remove these screws on these Mitchell reels. Have a very, very thin slot. Make sure that you have a screwdriver that fits them properly. This old wooden screwdriver that I have is just a perfect fit for these Mitchell reels. It is exactly the right width, exactly the right thickness, and it does a tremendously good job of removing these Mitchell screws. Okay, notice the orientation of this side cover on this reel. The knob is up near the handle, and the writing is right side up if the reel is hanging upside down on a rod, which is its normal configuration for fishing. Okay, now we're going to remove the side cover, push down on the main gear, and out it comes. There's our side cover, and we're going to clean that up in a little bit. Now we will remove the main gear. And maybe that does come up out of there if you pry at it, but I suggest you not. It's in there, it fits tight, leave it alone. All right. Next thing we're going to do is remove these two screws right here. Now these are much smaller than the other screws that we took out earlier. Let's see if you can see them. Okay, those are two little bitty screws. And they hold in the slide. The slide mounts directly to the axle shaft with these two screws. What I suggest you do is that you keep the slide and the two screws together. That way you know that those two screws are the ones that go in that slide. With those in, you can now remove the axle shaft. All right, it's over to the side. Now we're going to remove the rotor. Now, when we go to remove this rotor, I'm going to show you something. Someone intuitively installed this incorrectly. They put it in the way they thought it went, but if you check the schematic, it doesn't go the way they said, or the way they installed it. Take this nut off. The next part that should be on there if I can get it to come out. The next part that should be on there is this Bale Release. Alright? It should be on top. Instead, what we have is we have a washer, a shim, and then the Bale Release. That's not the way it's supposed to be. The washer and the shim should be underneath. And then the Bale Release goes on top. That's important for the spacing of the Bale Release. So don't put it in the wrong position. Once that's off, now you can slide the rotor off. And that is everything here except removing the screw for here, and there's no need to do that. That's a lubrication screw. All right, here's where things are going to get tricky. We're going to go ahead and take this bale apart. We got one screw on the end here. Now here's something that I learned from Dennis when you do take this apart. If you take this apart and this bale piece shoots out and sticks way out over here, that bale is bent. So what you want that bale to pretty much do what this one is doing. It fits right on. Okay, this bale is actually in very good condition. It does everything it's supposed to do. It locks, it pops loose, it flips over, but we're going to take it apart just so you can see how it goes together. All right, we've taken the other side off. Now we're going to take the large side off. This is the side with the spring in it. And this is the tricky part to get back together. Okay, you remove the screw, set it with the other screw. Now when this comes out, the spring is going to try to pop out. Be very careful as you open it up and let that spring out. All right, now the bale is off, the spring is released. Now we have nothing but the Bale Release right here, and we're going to take that off. If you look right here, the screw's inside. And there's actually grit inside this one, so it's actually good that we are taking it apart to get the grit and grease out. All right, now this is spring loaded. Notice the spring here that holds it in place. All right, once the spring is off, you can take it out. And there we go, we're ready to clean that up, and it's got a lot of grit and grease on it. So we're going to take that apart, clean it. All right, so that's every single part of the reel is completely disassembled, which, like I said, this is something we don't normally do. You don't normally need to take it down this far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick cleanup on all the parts and inspect them, make sure all the parts are good, and then we're going to come back and reassemble. The only thing I'm going to do for cleanup is spray each of the parts and scrub them down good. I use a well, there is a part that we haven't disassembled. I don't know if we can disassemble it. We'll find out in a minute. All right, that's all the parts, and we're going to clean it up. I'm not going to be talking during this, so I'm going to put it in fast forward and we'll zip right on by all this cleanup, but you'll at least have seen the cleanup. All right, parts are clean. Okay, now that all the parts are clean, we are going to start reassembling. And let's start off with the most difficult portion. That's going to be this Bale and Bale Spring. If you look, the Bale Spring has this tab off the one end and the other end shoots up this way. All right, so you take that tab and you insert it in the slot right there. That's going to leave this one sticking up. Well, the one sticking up, you can't see that, right? All right. See this tab right here? All right. This tab is sticking up. Well, that tab is going to go into this teeny tiny hole right there. See that little hole beside that post? That little tab is going to go in there. So what you're going to do is take your bale and start off down here, down underneath the rotor, and put that spring into that hole. Once it's in the hole, go ahead and hook the one on the other side. It helps keep it in place, and you start to rotate it. Well, once you get to right here, it's going to freeze on you and it won't come up any further. And what you're going to have to do is very gently lift out to clear this little shoulder right here. But you can't go so far that you pull the spring out of the hole. Okay, get it down. There you go. You've got it in. Let's put the screw in it. That is by far the hardest part of this reel. Make sure there's a shoulder on this screw. Make sure that that shoulder actually fits down inside the bale. Otherwise, it's going to bind and it won't hold properly. There you go. All right, let's put the screw in the other side. There's a good bale. And let's go ahead and lubricate it. All right. Now we're going to install the Bale Release. The Bale Release has a spring built into it. One end has a hook on it, the other end does not. The end with the hook on it, you want to be sticking out away from the far end of the Bale Release, and we're going to slide it back into the rotor. Make sure the spring clears and doesn't get caught on the screw. Once you've got it sitting like that, you can go ahead and put the screw in. Forgot to tell you something. When you put this in, see this portion of the spring down here, the forward side? This end here has to be on this side of the screw. Okay? It would have been nice if they'd put a little hook on there, but they didn't. So just make sure that it stays on this side of the screw, and that will take care of it. Okay? Slide it all down. Make sure not to bend that spring if it gets caught in the seat. There we go. It's hard to see from your perspective and my perspective at the same time. So, and again, this is a part that normally doesn't have to come out. So if you don't have to take it out to clean grease and stuff off, leave it alone. Leave it in there. All right, I've got the spring now on this side of the screw. We're going to slip the screw back in. Put it in the hole. Tighten it down. See how it works now? And it locks the bale in place and it releases the bale. All right? Make sure it's tight. Once that's done, oil it. But again, normally all you have to do is oil this bale. There's no reason to take it off unless you've got dirt and grit inside. All right, that's the difficult part. I'm going to back out a little bit now. Next step is to go ahead and grease the shaft for the rotor. A little bit of grease is all it takes. Put a little grease on it. Then go ahead and grease the gears on the rotor. Obviously at this point you would have inspected them like I did when I cleaned them. Made sure they were all good, all the teeth were good. Then slip it on. All right. Once that's in place, you're ready to reinstall your shim and your washer. Now there can be up to 3 of these shims in here underneath this. This one only had 1, but it's a shim pack and it could be up to 3. Okay? Okay. Back to an installation. We've got the shim installed, we've got the washer installed, then on top of that goes our Bale Release. It's the ramp for the Bale Release, and there's a flat spot on this shaft, and if you look, it's right at the very top. So that's where the flat spot on this Bale Release needs to go. Goes in like that. Then you're ready to install the nut. And that nut is an 8mm. It also, if you don't have an 8mm, if you're stuck in the SAE world, it's also an 1130 seconds. Okay, there we go. We got the Bale Release installed. Flip the bale, and it releases the bale. All right, and I need to quit saying all right. Next thing we're going to do is install the axle shaft. Take your axle shaft, go ahead. A lot of people will grease this. I don't. It's a sliding part, so I think it creates too much friction to grease it. So I oil it, slide it on inside. Notice that it's got a flat side right here with the 2 screws. Slide that all the way in and keep the flat side up. Now with that up, we're ready to reinstall the slide. Set your slide in place with your 2 screws. Get your little micro screwdriver. Now remember, those are very small screws. Do not over tighten them. Alright, with that done, we are now going to install. Make sure this slides nice, and it does. It's all oiled well. We're going to set it right in the middle, and we're going to line up the post for the crosswind block or the slide. We're going to line it up with the slot in that slide. And we're going to put a little bit of grease on the face of this because that's going to slide on the slide. Alright, set it in place so that that notch goes into the slide. With that in place, we're now ready to reinstall the side shaft. Again, because this is a rotating part, I use oil instead of grease on there. Line your cover up so that the print is this way and your anti-reverse dog is up. Go ahead and flip the slit lever if you've forgotten to leave it off, which I did. I forgot to leave it disengaged. Set this in place. Now, if you misalign where these holes are, what will happen is you'll set the screw in place and it's just going to drop down all the way through and feel like there's no hole there. Well, it's because there is no hole. If you look, see these have a boss on 3 sides with the hole in it. If you go beside that, it's just going to drop down in the hole and you've got nothing. So make sure that you are in the hole when you drop your screw in. Alright, with that there, spin it. Make sure that your axle shaft rotates up and down so it will move the spool up and down. Take your handle. Tighten it back down. Go ahead and lubricate the shaft for the handle knob. Make sure you don't cross thread it. Tighten it down. All right. This washer right here is your drag washer for this reel. I lubricate drag washers with drag grease. And it doesn't take a lot, just a little, so it's going to be sliding. Slide your spool back on. Put your drag nut back on. Tighten it down. Now you're going to want to tighten your drag nut down until you can't move the drag anymore. Unless you're Hercules, of course. But just like that, tighten it down. It's nice and tight. And loosen it back up until you've got an adequate drag. Okay? And that's exactly what we have. Alright. That's a little too tight still. And again, like I've said before on some of my other videos, if you haven't watched them, when you are putting this in storage and not going to be fishing it for a while, loosen your drag up so that you're not squishing that drag washer. What will happen is that drag washer will freeze up to the face of the spool and it won't work anymore. You won't have a drag. And there you have the Garcia Mitchell 304, how to take it apart, how to put it back together, including the Bale and the Bale Spring. Now I've got one bonus feature. We're going to move over here to this reel. Now notice on this reel, let's zoom in a little bit so you can see better. Alright, notice on this reel at the top, let's turn it so it is a top. At the top, the line is thick, at the bottom it's thin. And what that is, that's caused because the spool was sitting too far down on the case. Okay? Now when I took this apart, what I found, you just saw the drag washer in the other one. Well, this is what someone had put in here as a drag washer. Alright? That is an inadequate drag washer. Alright? It's a Teflon. Probably wouldn't be too bad if the center hole was at least the right size, but that's still too thin because it's causing the line to spool up inadequately. Well, I happen to have a spare drag washer laying around. So we're going to slide that on. There we go. We're going to lubricate the new drag washer. Reinstall the spool. There we go. Got a good drag. The only way you're going to fix this line on this is to go ahead and spool it out. You can either wind it onto another spool, or you can get your neighborhood kid to grab hold of it and say, hey, run this out there, and then wind it back in. But that will realign this and put it back where it needs to be on the reel. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you like this video, please hit the like button. If you dislike the button, then go ahead, hit the dislike by all means. At least that gives me some input. If you like what I've done, please leave some comments. I really do like to see comments on there. And if you would like to see more of these kind of videos, please subscribe. Thank you.